So, good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to this first in our Bringing Law to Life series of talks. My name is Katie Dukes. I'm a Student Experience Manager and Associate Lecturer here at the Open University, and I'm very pleased to welcome Rachel Herron. Hi, Rachel. Thank you very much for coming along today, who's an in-house counsel, and Rachel will be chatting to me in a moment. And I'd also like to welcome Joanna Mirek-Tooth, another Student Experience Manager, who's going to be joining us. So thank you very much to all of you who have come along today. And just a reminder that this is the first of 14 events in total. So I would encourage you to sign up for more, or you can watch the recordings, which will all be available on the Law School YouTube page. So as you will have been aware from the advert for this series of talks, this is about equality and diversity in the legal profession, and the legal profession has recognised the value of diversity and inclusion, but it is slow to take steps to foster a more inclusive environment, and that's what's really motivated us to bring this series of talks to you. And there are statistics available from both the Solicitors Regulation Authority and the Bar Council on how there are still significant disparities for underrepresented groups. So this series of talks aims to increase awareness and understanding not only of the obstacles, but also the opportunities and support available for Open University students from underrepresented groups entering the legal profession. So we'd be really pleased if you could fill out our feedback survey at the end of this talk, and I'll be showing you some careers information as well. Also, there's a Q&A box, so if you'd like to ask Rachel some questions, there'll be some time at the end, and Rachel would be very happy to answer those. So thank you for that. If we don't have time for Rachel to answer all of the questions, then they will be answered in the forum on Law Study Home. So don't worry if your particular question doesn't get answered today, because we are aiming to finish at the 5:30. So Rachel, thank you very much again for coming along. And I wonder, just to begin, if you could describe your career journey into the profession. I know you've been working as an in-house counsel for 15 years, haven't you? Which is impressive in itself. But I wonder if you could talk to us about how you got into the profession.
Yeah, 15 years, it sounds a long time when you say it like that, but as they say, time flies when you're having fun. Yeah, so my current role is as a general commercial counsel working in a pharmaceutical company. What that means in terms of my current role is that I get to support a wide range of different parts of the business. So because it's pharmaceuticals, that includes our scientific affairs team, as we do R&D, research and development. It also includes our manufacturing facility because we manufacture product, and then also all our commercial teams because obviously we need to supply and sell product into the market so that it reaches patients. So that's my current role. Prior to that, I've worked in a couple of different organisations in in-house roles. So one within the engineering and construction sector, or within life sciences. And I suppose just from that, you can see that what in-house gives you as a lawyer is an opportunity to work across a wide range of different industries or types of business. So, think about what you're interested in, what sectors you're interested in, whether it's science, the arts, or something different. And actually, working in-house means that you can bring your legal skill and your legal career into that sector. So if I'm sort of going back a couple of decades now, that's a bit alarming, to think, how did I get into where I am now? I mean, I started actually with a non-law degree and then did the conversion into law. And I went through the fairly traditional route, training contract, like vacation schemes and work experience, a training contract in a regional firm, and then upon qualification, I went in-house. And I did that without necessarily having the kind of established networks or kind of familial background in law that might have given me a bit more of an advantage. So, had to make the very best use of, experiences I could gather along the way.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Thank you. I was going to ask you about that because I think that, perhaps it's one of the myths or perhaps it's true, but contacts can really help you to, get on in the legal profession. So I wonder what advice you might have for students that don't have any contacts in the legal profession, what kind of steps they can take.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think unfortunately, I think contacts can help, but I think what you need to have if you don't have those contacts is just to be a bit more on the front foot. So, like I said, I had no personal contacts and I didn't even have a law degree. So, to the
Yeah.
extent you're undergraduate lawyers, you're ahead of where I was. I think what you have to do is kind of think about where you want to get to. So, working in house or working in practice, you want your training contract, and then you have to work backwards from that and work out how you're going to get there. So, and we're talking actually working a few years backwards potentially. So, what did I do? I thought, so what will I need to get to be a lawyer? I will need a training contract. What will I need to get a training contract? I will need work experience and vacation placements. What will I need to get those formal vacation placements? Okay, I need practical experience and I need academic experience. So that's where I sort of started strategizing, if you like.
Yeah.
So,
That
like, working backwards from the end point, how you get there. And then, so thinking about the practical experience, I didn't have those personal contacts, as we said, that might get me into the door of an office. So what did I do? Well, it wasn't sophisticated. I emailed. I think I probably wrote actually at the time, but I got in contact with every local law firm, and a couple of them replied. Not many, not proportionately, not very much, but you only need one or two.
yeah.
And then I got a week of work experience or a couple of weeks of work experience in an office, and that was my first foot in the door. It gave me an experience that showed me a legal office environment, and gave me some of the sort of familiarity with what goes on in a law firm that would then sort of I could build on and by using those experiences and talking about what I'd learned from them, I could get additional experiences, VAC schemes and then training contracts. So it's kind of like working backwards, just one step at a time, getting those experiences and exposure to
Yeah.
a practical law environment.
And I think what's particularly interesting about your career path is that it has been in-house. I think students might think, oh, I'm going to go and work in a law firm, and that's like the main option. But one of the things that you've said that struck me is that students might have a particular interest in, sports or media or something that's not legal, but they can pursue that interest as a lawyer. So perhaps would they benefit from getting or if they've got work experience in a completely different area, do you think? Because you
Oh,
said you work in
absolutely.
science and you didn't have
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
No, I absolutely think actually. So getting work experience in a law office is probably like the most obvious first step that gives you something very directly transferable to talk about. But there are, any working experiences can give you the skills and experiences that you can bring to your interview and talk about. You know, I don't know, clearly communicating, delivering to deadlines, problem solving. All of those are very
Yeah.
typical office environment matters that crop up, and they're all also relevant when you're working as part of a legal function or as a lawyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. So I wanted to ask you specifically your opinions or if you've got any views on how accessible or diverse the legal profession is in your experience.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sort of speaking from the perspective of working in house, and I suppose working in house, that where you might be working and the environment in which you might be working is as varied as they come. So I think actually, um, you get companies that are very on the front foot in terms of um, being open and inclusive and having policies, and you can find that in the really big corporate companies
Mm.
that they really care about their sort of social mission alongside their commercial objectives. You can also find it in a very different way in very small companies who just have the ability to be a bit more flexible and open and really just want to find person who's going to be the best at performing their role they need to be performed, without any kind of preconceptions on the exact content of their CV or exactly what they might look like. So I think actually being in-house, more than anywhere else, you need to kind of get a flavour of what kind of company you want to work for. Doing your research into those companies, that will really, if you feel like you've got a non-traditional route, you want to do your research and find those companies that you think are actually going to value that and actually see the benefit of that. And I think that's one of the skills you might need to work on in interviews is take your experience, whether it's typical or atypical, and kind of craft that to show how you will bring benefit to the company. How has that helped to hone your legal problem solving skills? How has that helped you hone your ability to interact with a really wide variety of stakeholders and colleagues and other people? So yeah, I mean, I think so. So it's a mixed bag, and do your research and find a culture that you think will value you and fit you. At the same time, there is a general sort of consensus that working in-house is the more sort of flexible, family-friendly kind of environment. You aren't in that kind of hothouse of legals all vying to become the next capital equity partner. So it can be more kind of, flexible in that respect. But again, it really depends on the company you go for. I've worked 50-hour weeks. I've worked much more the 9 to 4 kind of weeks. It's really variable.
Oh, thank you. I was going to come on to ask you about work-life balance, but I just wanted to say that I think that you've given a really interesting perspective on possibilities of, career choice for a law graduate, because, the main path would, I'm sure, for students be going into legal practice in a law firm or perhaps at the bar, but, that idea that you can go and work in-house for a company where you really have a particular interest and, where there are very, very different cultures. I think, as you said, very different kind of working cultures is fantastic perspective. Thank you, Rachel. So work-life balance, you just said you've had 50-hour weeks, which doesn't sound much fun, but much less than that. Well, 50 might be, yeah.
Do you know that I suppose I chose not to be in a law firm. I didn't choose the 50-hour week every week.
Yeah.
But for me, the 50-hour week represented a really exciting business matter that I was handling. And actually, so I kind of I took it because of the learning opportunities and the sort of interest in the actual matter. So I didn't begrudge it. Maybe I would if it became every week. But yeah, work-life balance, I think it varies on the company. It really does. I think within the in-house environment, the legal function is typically seen as being the longest working hours of the company. We'll get our contracts and they'll say 8:30 to 4:30, like everybody else's contract, but it will also say and any other such hours as you might be expected. And what that really means in reality, it depends on the company. So you have to, again, I think you have to research your company, research the culture, consider where do you want to be, and I suppose as well think about where you want to go with your career as well, because there is a difference between doing a job and doing it very competently and solidly, and you do that 8:30 to 4:30 versus if you're trying to impress and you're trying to move up. And I don't think that's any different within a company or a law firm, that if you want to get the promotions and the career trajectory, at some points in that, unfortunately, work-life balance, it shifts a bit.
Yeah.
It's reality and it's not an essential thing to do, but if you want to do it, you have to put in the hours at points.
At points, yeah. No, that's
not
very, very realistic. Yeah. And Rachel, I wonder if we could talk about one of the issues that's recently been recognised as really important in higher education in particular, and for students, is the role of role models and mentors. And I wonder if you might say a word or two about if you've got any advice for students on that, or whether you have had any experience of mentors or role models that have been particularly helpful to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've found really great advocates in my working life. I think that's the sort of the main area I've seen. I've seen role models and sort of experienced that mentorship. And again, I think whether it's a law firm or an in-house team or a role that's not within the law, I would suggest, if you enter a working environment and you see people who you admire in terms of their skill set or their capabilities, their expertise, ask them if they're willing to give you that time and attention, and say, can we catch up once a month, and just discuss, any issues or areas for development. I'm really keen to learn. I saw you present and it was a really great experience. You captivated the audience, whatever it is. So look out for those people who you admire and then bite the bullet and ask them. And actually, people are very flattered by being
Yeah.
asked. And in my experience, they've been very willing to give the time. And you might have a sort of a set up this like a mentoring relationship for a year or 6 months, and then you might move on. And at different points in your time, you might have different people who can help you. It's not like a lifelong relationship. You'll be thinking, what's the skill I want to develop now? Is it in
Mm.
the field of my legal expertise, perhaps if you're more junior? Or as you progress, is it more in the field of effective communication or, stakeholder management or whatever? And you'll see people and you'll, you know, tap them up, see if they
Yeah.
can help you, because it's more likely than not that somebody's helped them in the past, and they are really keen. They're flattered and also keen to repay the favour. So I think the working environment, even outside the legal realm, can be a good source of people to learn from and learn with.
Well, I guess from what you've said about how you got started, maybe it goes back to those letters that you wrote to all of the local law firms in your local town, right at the
Exactly.
beginning before you knew anyone in the legal profession.
Yeah, exactly that. So, send out 20, get 2 positive responses, because, I mean, there was nothing in it for them. I wasn't bringing a great deal of value to this. Let's not pretend. But yeah, they just thought, well, okay, somebody helped me, I will help them. And I went and had that experience for a couple of weeks, and it just moved me on that one step.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Rachel. That's brilliant. I'm just wondering if we've got any Q&As, any Qs, questions. Joanna, would you like to step in at this point? Have we got some questions, or can I carry on chatting to Rachel?
Katie, I cannot see any questions at the moment, and it's just to
Okay,
remind everyone that if you would like to post a question, please do it through the Q&A. But if you want to continue with your questions, please do.
thank you. So, Rachel, I really want to take advantage of you having you here, because it's really unusual to have somebody that's got so much experience of working in-house, and it's such a varied and rich career for someone that's gone into the legal profession. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit more about the people. You have referred to managing stakeholders, but I'm sure some of our students won't really have an idea of what that might mean in practice. So if you could just tell us about the people, the agencies and stakeholders that you work with, that would be really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid when you move into the world of corporate, you do unfortunately pick up this jargon. So stakeholders is a little bit of jargon, but what it really means is just the people you interact with in your working life. So you have internal stakeholders. So those will be other people who work in the same company as me, but probably are outside the legal team. And you'll have also external stakeholders. So those are people who work for the companies that we interact with. So I think one of the best things about working in-house is just the variety of both internal and external stakeholders I get to work with. So it will really vary on your on the company you work for. But like I say, working in a pharmaceutical company, I get to work with the scientists who are engaging in research and development to develop new medicines. I get to work with our technical operations team who are on the manufacturing side, and then also my commercial colleagues who are in multiple countries across the world. They sell our products to healthcare systems. So, you know, a wide range of different areas of expertise there. And, you know, it's really nice that you have these very diverse groups and everyone's bringing their own specialism. So the specialism I bring is the legal angle, which is really nice. So you rarely work with multiple lawyers, but instead you'll have colleagues from all different parts of the business. And that's quite a different feeling, I think, than being in a law firm where you have quite a clear cohort. So if you enter into a law firm as a trainee, there might be multiple trainees. So you have your peer group and then you'll progress through the firm together. It's a bit different in-house, and actually you can even be the only lawyer in the company, and that's, you know, big pressure.
Yeah, that sounds intimidating.
Yeah, but also great variety of work. I mean, there's no such thing as kind of strictly sticking to legal, if you like, when you're in-house. You're often asked for advice from a kind of common sense perspective, just kind of like a sound, thoughtful, intelligent person to ask a question to. And you know that in-house is really quite sort of non-hierarchical typically, and so yeah, anyone can ask a question of legal and you answer them, and it's really nice. It's very varied, and yeah, like I say, pretty non-hierarchical, because actually you're all just working to, you know, fulfill the business objectives. And in my case, that's all about getting products to patients, which is, you know, it feels good to be using the law in that particular fashion.
So would you be advising on contract law mainly?
Yeah, a great deal of it is contract law. So my roles are very, despite it having a specialist industry, my role is a very general corporate commercial role. So I do lots of drafting and negotiation of contracts, because obviously contracts are how my company interacts with other companies. That's the relationship we forge. So negotiating contracts, ending contracts, amending contracts, dealing unfortunately with the disputes that come out of contracts, and pre sort of litigation kind of activities. So that's all around supporting our commercial operations. There's also sort of the other limb of the role is about looking after the company as a corporate entity. So that's the corporate part of company commercial, or the corporate commercial. And so that's all about sort of company filings and dealing with employee matters, because the company employs, dealing with property matters, because obviously the property has a lease of a, the company has a lease of a property. So really kind of like the day-to-day admin that is involved in any corporate entity you have. So yeah, company commercial is probably the general skill set that would sort of fit best into these in-house roles.
Thank you. So final question, Rachel, because we've only got 5 minutes left. So if we've got students that have really enjoyed contract law, and I'm sure we have, some students find it really straightforward and really enjoy that logic that often applies to, and clarity, hopefully, that applies to contract law. What would you advise, if they've really like the sound of an in-house role? What would they, I know you talked about stepping, thinking into the ahead and sort of taking steps backwards from their final, but would they go and work in a company, or what would they do right now if they were interested in doing something like you're doing?
Right now, I suppose it's two-pronged. I would get the practical experience in any way, shape or form that you can. And if you're already working, actually, try and mine that experience to pull out the relevant skills. So if you're in a company, not necessarily a legal role, think about what might be the transferable skills. And if there's any scope in your current role to kind of work with the law firm the law department, or a team that has sort of touches some legal matters, so for example procurement or HR or real estate, you know, see if that is on the cards. So get that practical experience. You know, do what you can to brush up your academics, because it's never going to hurt you. And yeah, then just you know, if try and get that experience to get your training contract. And also bear in mind that you can these days you can do training contracts in-house, so you don't even necessarily need to go to the law firm initially.
Yeah.
Not to mention, there's also this sort of the apprenticeship role. So actually, starting in-house and staying in-house is a much more viable option than it was, say, you know, 10, 15 years ago. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was really, really interesting, and I think a really unusual and valuable insight for students in thinking about the wide choices that they have when they finish their law degree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, Katie, I do have a question actually from a student, if that's okay. We've got a few more minutes. So Rachel, I will just read it out to you because I know that you cannot see the Q&A box. So I am partly deaf, and would this be a disadvantage for me in the law sector or going in-house like yourself, Rachel?
I would sincerely hope not. And I think it goes back to what I said about, you know, looking into companies and gauging their culture and openness to support you. You know, there are legal obligations as regards reasonable adjustments. So obviously, you know, that's something you could expect. In terms of the sort of day-to-day, like activities, it's all about, and increasingly about, answering emails. Actually, sometimes I describe my job as answering emails, because that's what we do a great deal of the time, answering emails and taking Teams calls. So, you know, to the extent you can do that, you're bringing your legal advice, you're communicating it effectively, largely in a written form, then, you know, I don't see why there should. And I would hope that, you know, wish you all the best, and yeah, look for the companies that will accommodate you by reasonable adjustments, and then just, you know, dazzle them with your skills.
Thank you. That was a great question as well. Really good to hear about that. Thank you. So I am going to just bring some information now about the employability resources that we've got for our attendees. So I hope that you can see there on the slide, you've got all of the resources available in terms of careers and employability services, your career planning guide. Rachel was talking about the importance of planning, and then the opportunity hub, where you can find opportunities for employment. There's CV advice, and you can have a one-to-one with a careers consultant. So you can click on those links, and those links are available also in our careers hub. So please do make the most of those. Again, we've got further resources there behind those links, so you can click on them now, or you can go to the careers part of the OU website and link on those. So you can do that at any time now, or for up to 3 years after you have finished your studies, and you've got all of those tools, resources, events, and as I say, you can have one-to-one consultations with the careers team. So please do make the most of those. And it's 5:30, so I would be really grateful if you could complete our feedback survey. So if you could click on that link for me now and fill in those few questions on whether you've enjoyed this evening, whether you've feel like you've learned something. I'm sure you have. I certainly have got some real insights into what it's like working in-house, and how to overcome any obstacles to accessing that profession, and those hints and tips that Rachel has given. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. And thank you all very much indeed for attending, and looking forward to seeing you at the next Bringing Law to Life talk with our next associate lecturer, who's also practicing in the profession. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we will provide the responses to any questions on the forum, the ones that we haven't been able to respond to in the session. Thank you.
And another thank you very much to Rachel. That was great.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks. Bye-bye.